The people who drain your energy without you knowing. Have you ever noticed how some people leave you feeling empty? Not angry, not sad, but hollow, like something vital has been drawn out of you, and you can't quite name what it was. You've spent an hour with them, maybe a pleasant hour, maybe even a loving hour. And yet when you walk away, you feel like you need to recover, to be alone, to refill something that's been mysteriously depleted. We talk about toxic people, about narcissists and manipulators, about those who hurt us deliberately. But what about the others? The ones who smile and laugh and care for us in their way, yet somehow, inexplicably, leave us drained. What about the friend who always needs just one more favor? The family member whose presence requires you to become someone smaller? The colleague who turns every conversation into a performance you must witness? These aren't villains in your story. They're often people you love, people you've chosen, people who, on paper, should energize you, but instead do the opposite. And here's the mystery: they may not even know they're doing it. You certainly don't understand why it's happening. You just know that after being with them, you need silence like a person needs air. This isn't about blame. It's about something far more interesting, a hidden exchange happening beneath the surface of your relationships, an unconscious transaction that leaves you bankrupt without your realizing you've been spending it all. Let me tell you about Sarah. She has a best friend. Let's call her Maya, who she's known since college. Maya is funny, generous, always there in a crisis. When Sarah's father died, Maya showed up with groceries and stayed for 3 days. Sarah loves Maya, she truly does, but after every phone call with her, Sarah feels exhausted. After every coffee date, Sarah needs an entire evening to herself. She's started avoiding Maya's texts, then feeling guilty about it, then responding, then regretting it. Sarah can't explain it to anyone. What would she say? My friend, who's been nothing but kind to me, drains my energy? It sounds absurd, ungrateful, mean-spirited, so Sarah stays silent, confused by her own feelings, wondering if something is wrong with her. This is the peculiar suffering of the energetically drained. It comes without vocabulary, without validation, without clear cause. You can't point to a wound because there isn't one. You can't identify the weapon because nothing has been wielded. You just know that certain people, certain relationships, require a tax on your vitality that seems wildly disproportionate to what actually transpires between you. We live in a world that teaches us to identify obvious harms. Yelling, criticism, cruelty, these we can name and address. But what about the subtler extractions? The friend who monopolizes every conversation but never seems aggressive about it. The parent whose love comes wrapped in expectations you can't quite articulate. The partner who needs constant reassurance but never explicitly demands it. The coworker who creates urgency around themselves like a weather system, pulling everyone into their atmospheric pressure. These people aren't trying to drain you. That's what makes it so confusing. They're often kind. They often care. They may even be trying to connect, to love, to support. And yet, the effect remains. You feel diminished in their presence, hollowed out, as if your energy is being siphoned through channels you can't see. Most of us respond to this confusion in predictable ways. We blame ourselves. Maybe I'm just too sensitive, too introverted, not patient enough. We blame them. Maybe they're secretly toxic and I'm just not seeing it. We ignore it. Every relationship has its challenges. We rationalize it. I'm just tired lately. It's not about them. But none of these responses address the real mystery. Why do certain people drain us when they're not doing anything overtly harmful? Why do we feel guilty about needing distance from people who haven't technically wronged us? Why does our body know something our mind can't yet articulate? The truth is, we're taught to understand relationships through actions and words, through what people do and say. But energy moves through different channels entirely. It flows through the unconscious, through what isn't said, through what's needed but not asked for, through what's projected but not owned. Consider the colleague who walks into every room like they're the protagonist of reality itself. They're not rude. They're not even particularly self-centered in their conversation. But somehow, in their presence, you become an extra in their movie. Your thoughts feel less important. Your contributions feel smaller. You find yourself performing a role: the supportive friend, the impressed listener, the audience member, and when they leave, you realize you've been holding your breath. Or think about the family member who loves you deeply but cannot see you. They see who they need you to be, who they've decided you are, who fits their story of the family. And in their presence, you feel yourself shrinking, compressing, becoming that version of yourself even though it stopped fitting years ago. You're not pretending exactly, you're not lying, but you're not fully present either. You're managing them, managing their perception, managing the gap between who you are and who they can see. This is the landscape of invisible energy drain, relationships where love and depletion coexist, where connection and exhaustion walk hand in hand. And most of us spend years in these relationships without understanding what's happening, without language for the experience, without permission to honor what we feel. Carl Jung understood something crucial about human relationship that most of us miss. We don't just interact with other people, we interact with their unconscious, and they with ours. Every relationship is actually four relationships: the conscious you meeting the conscious them, the conscious you meeting their unconscious, your unconscious meeting their conscious, and your unconscious meeting theirs. When someone drains your energy without you knowing why, you're often encountering what Jung called projection. But not projection in the simple sense of their projecting their issues onto you. Something far more intricate is occurring. They're unconsciously using you to carry parts of themselves they cannot hold, and you, often unconsciously, are accepting the burden. Jung wrote about the shadow, those aspects of ourselves we've exiled into the unconscious because they don't fit the image we need to maintain. We all have shadows, we all repress things. The question is, what do we do with what we've repressed? Some of us turn inward to reclaim it. Others unconsciously search for people who will carry it for us. Think about the person who drains you by needing constant reassurance. On the surface, this seems straightforward. They're insecure. They need validation. But look deeper through Jung's lens. What might really be happening? They've split off their own inner authority, their own capacity to self-validate, and they need you to hold it for them. They've made their self-worth dependent on external reflection. And every time you're with them, you're unconsciously recruited to be their mirror, their validator, the holder of their projected strength. This is exhausting, not because reassuring someone is inherently draining, but because you're being asked to carry what they should be carrying themselves. You're holding their shadow, their disowned capacity for self-love, and it's too heavy because it isn't yours to hold. Or consider the energetic vampire who monopolizes conversations. Jung would invite us to look at what they've disowned. Often, it's their inner listener, their capacity to receive rather than project. They've identified entirely with expression, with being seen and heard, and they unconsciously need someone else to embody the receptive principle. You become the vessel for their rejected silence, and vessels eventually overflow. What Jung called the persona is equally relevant here. The persona is the mask we show the world, the social self we've constructed. When someone's persona is particularly rigid or demanding, being around them requires you to maintain a complementary mask. The friend who's always on, always cheerful, always energetic, may unconsciously require you to be stable, grounded, serious, to hold the opposite pole they've rejected. You can't be tired around them, you can't be down, because if you are, their persona cracks, and that threatens them unconsciously. This is why you feel drained. You're not just being yourself, you're holding up their psychological structure. You're a load-bearing wall in someone else's architecture. Jung spoke of the individuation process, the journey toward psychological wholeness, toward integrating what we've split off. People who drain you are often people who have abandoned their individuation journey, consciously or unconsciously. They're not integrating their shadow, they're finding others to hold it. They're not balancing their inner opposites, they're creating external relationships that maintain their internal splits. And here's what makes this painful. Often these are people in the early stages of their own awakening, people who are beginning to sense their inner fragmentation but don't yet have the tools or courage to face it directly, so they orbit people who embody what they lack. They're drawn to your groundedness because they've disowned theirs. They're attracted to your authenticity because they're drowning in their persona. They need your energy because they're disconnected from their own source. Jung would say that what exhausts you isn't the person themselves. It's the unconscious contract you've entered into where you agree to carry their disowned psychic content. And you enter this contract often because your own unconscious needs something too. Maybe you've identified as the helper, the strong one, the person who doesn't need. Maybe you've disowned your own need, your own vulnerability, and so you unconsciously seek relationships where you can be the giver, never the receiver. This is the genius of Jung's psychology. He understood that draining relationships are complementary. It's not just that they drain you, it's that you permit it because something in you needs this dynamic to maintain your own psychological structure. The martyr needs the taker, the listener needs the talker, the strong one needs the weak one, but here's the crucial point Jung makes: this is unconscious. Neither party has chosen this deliberately. Both are caught in an archetypal pattern, a dance of projections and shadow material, each seeking in the other what they've exiled from themselves. The person draining you isn't a villain. They're someone who hasn't yet reclaimed their wholeness, and you're someone who hasn't yet learned that carrying others' shadows is not the same as love. What Jung called the self, the totality of the psyche, the integrated whole, this is what both parties have lost touch with. And until both begin their individuation journey, until both turn inward to reclaim what they've projected outward, the relationship will continue to drain because it's built on deficit, on incompletion, on unconscious need rather than conscious wholeness. The person who drains you is showing you something about yourself, not because you're to blame, but because every relationship is a mirror. Their need reveals your need to be needed. Their lack of boundaries reveals your difficulty maintaining yours. Their unconscious projection finds its mark in you because somewhere you've agreed to receive it. Nietzsche wrote, "When you look into an abyss, the abyss also looks into you." This captures something essential about energy, draining relationships. The drain is mutual, even when it appears one-sided. We think energy is being taken from us, but the deeper truth is that we're giving it away, often without conscious awareness, often because doing so serves something in our own unconscious. The existentialists understood this paradox of freedom and bad faith. Sartre would say that when we claim someone drains us without our consent, we're engaging in bad faith, denying our own freedom, our own role in constructing the situation. We are, at every moment, choosing to remain in proximity to those who drain us. We are, through subtle acts and agreements, permitting the drain. This doesn't mean we're to blame. It means we're more powerful than we realize. But here's where it gets interesting philosophically. The drain often serves a purpose. Consider the Hegelian dialectic thesis, antithesis, synthesis. In relationships that drain us, we're often playing out an internal dialectic externally. The person draining us represents something we've rejected in ourselves, and the relationship is the battleground where we work out this inner conflict. The friend who needs constant attention might represent your own disowned need for attention. The family member who cannot see you might represent your own inability to see yourself. The colleague who dominates space might represent your own unexpressed desire to take up space. What drains you about them is precisely what you've judged and exiled in yourself. Eastern philosophy offers another angle. In Buddhist thought, attachment is the root of suffering. When someone drains your energy, look at your attachment not to them necessarily, but to who you become in their presence. You might be attached to being needed, to being the strong one, to being helpful, to maintaining a certain image. The drain isn't just about their taking, it's about your holding on, the Taoist concept of wu-wei. Effortless action, flowing with nature, is violated in draining relationships. There's effort, resistance, forcing. You're trying to be someone you're not. You're trying to give what you don't have. You're trying to receive them while rejecting parts of yourself. There's no flow because the relationship is built on artifice, on roles, on unconscious contracts rather than authentic meeting. Kierkegaard spoke of the sickness unto death despair, the condition of not being oneself. Many draining relationships keep us in this despair. We cannot be ourselves around certain people, and so we exist in a perpetual state of self-denial. This is literally soul sickness, and of course it manifests as energy depletion. How could it not? You're dying a small death every time you're with them. Martin Buber distinguished between I, thou and I, it relationships. I, thou is authentic meeting, two wholes encountering each other. I, it is using another person as an object, a means to an end. Draining relationships are often I, it on both sides. They're using you to hold their shadow, to validate them, to maintain their persona. And you're using them to confirm your identity as helper, as strong, as needed, as whatever role you've decided you must play. The drain happens because there's no genuine encounter, only mutual use. And use without reciprocity, use without consciousness, use without authentic exchange. This depletes the soul. Simone Weil wrote about attention as the rarest and purest form of generosity. In draining relationships, there's often no attention, not in Weil's sense. There's focus, perhaps, interaction, certainly, but attention, that deep seeing and presence, it's absent. They don't truly see you, and often, you don't truly see them. You see the role you need them to play. They see the function they need you to serve. And attention, real attention, is impossible within this structure. The philosophical question beneath all of this: what does it mean to be with another person, not merely in proximity, but genuinely with them? Most of our relationships, if we're honest, involve parallel play, two people enacting their own internal dramas in the same space, occasionally colliding, rarely truly meeting. Heidegger's concept of thrownness, that we're thrown into existence without choosing it, lies here too. We're thrown into relationships, into families, into social contexts where patterns of energy exchange were established long before we had consciousness or choice. The drain you feel with certain people may be an inherited pattern, a family or cultural script about who gives and who takes, who matters and who doesn't, who gets to have needs and who must serve. But here's the transformative insight from existential philosophy. Once we become conscious of these patterns, we're no longer merely thrown. We can choose. We can, as Sartre insisted, create ourselves anew in every moment. The person who drained you yesterday can only continue to drain you today if you reconstruct that dynamic through your choices in this moment. This is simultaneously terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because it means we can't hide behind victimhood, behind "they drain me," as if we're passive in the equation. Liberating because it means we have more power than we thought. The drain continues only through our ongoing participation. The Stoics would remind us, you cannot control other people, only your own responses. The person who drains you will continue being who they are. Your work isn't to change them, but to change your relationship to them, your participation in the dynamic, your willingness to enter the unconscious contract. So, how does this work in actual life? How do you begin to see what's been invisible, to reclaim the energy you've been unconsciously giving away? The first step is recognition without judgment. When you feel drained after being with someone, don't immediately move to fix it, or understand it, or make it mean something about your weakness or their toxicity. Just notice, I feel drained, this is information. Treat it like a fever. Data about your system, not a moral failing. You might notice that the drain has patterns. Certain people drain you in certain contexts, but not others. Your mother drains you at family dinners, but not on one walks. Your friend drains you in groups, but not in private. This tells you something. It's not about them essentially, it's about the dynamic, the role you're playing in that specific context. Start paying attention to who you become around people who drain you. Do you become smaller, quieter? Do you start performing? Does a certain voice come out of you, a certain posture, a certain presentation of self? This is your persona kicking in, your protective mask, and it's the mask that's exhausting, not necessarily the person triggering it. Ask yourself, what am I holding for this person that they should be holding for themselves? This is a powerful question. The friend who needs constant reassurance, you're holding their self-worth. The family member who dominates conversation, you're holding their capacity to listen. The colleague who creates drama, you're holding their calm. You're being a container for what they've split off. Now ask, why am I willing to hold this? What do I get? This isn't about blame. It's about understanding your own unconscious needs. Maybe holding their anxiety keeps you feeling needed. Maybe holding their weakness keeps you feeling strong. Maybe holding their chaos keeps you feeling stable. You're getting something too, even if it costs you. The practice is to start returning what isn't yours to carry. Not dramatically, not in confrontation, but through subtle shifts. When the friend seeks reassurance, you might say, I wonder what you think about that. When the family member steamrolls conversation, you might gently interrupt with your own story. When the colleague creates urgency, you might not join their panic. These small acts of boundary setting aren't mean. They're invitations for them to hold what they've been outsourcing. Invitations for you to stop betraying yourself through excessive caretaking. You'll feel guilty at first. That guilt is your persona protesting. Your persona has invested in being the helper, the listener, the strong one. When you shift, your persona feels threatened. Let it protest. Guilt is just the price of growth sometimes. Watch for what Jung called synchronicities, meaningful coincidences. As you shift internally, you'll notice external shifts. Maybe the draining friend suddenly becomes less available. Maybe the family dynamic changes without you saying anything. Maybe the colleague finds another target for their energy. This isn't magic. It's that you've stopped participating in the unconscious contract, and when one party withdraws, the dynamic has to reorganize. Some relationships will deepen through this work. As you stop carrying their shadow, they may be forced to face it themselves, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes, this catalyzes their own growth. The relationship transforms from unconscious complementarity to conscious reciprocity. You meet each other as wholes rather than half, people seeking completion through another. Other relationships will end or diminish. Some people need you to play the role you've been playing. When you stop, there's nothing left. This is painful but important information. It means the relationship was built on dysfunction, on mutual use, on unconscious need. Letting it go, or letting it transform into something much smaller, is an act of self-love. The practice is also learning to source your own energy rather than seeking it externally. People drain you partly because you're looking to relationships to fill what only inner work can fill. The more you develop your inner life through solitude, through creative practice, through what Jung called active imagination, the less vulnerable you are to external drain. This doesn't mean becoming isolated or self-sufficient in some cold way. It means becoming less desperate in relationship, less willing to betray yourself for connection, less available for unconscious contracts. It means coming to relationship from fullness rather than emptiness. You might start saying no more often. No to coffee dates that always leave you depleted. No to phone calls that feel like homework. No to gatherings where you perform rather than participate. Each no is a yes to yourself, to your energy, to your sovereignty. And yes, people will be hurt. They'll ask what's wrong. They'll feel rejected. This is where your work deepens. Can you hold your boundary while holding compassion? Can you disappoint others without abandoning yourself? Can you let them feel their feelings while you honor your truth? This is individuation in action, the claim of your own wholeness, even when others prefer you fragmented in ways that serve them. Something shifts when you stop giving your energy away unconsciously. It's subtle at first, like adjusting to a new prescription for glasses. The world looks the same, but clearer, with better depth perception. You notice you have more energy for things you actually care about. That exhaustion you thought was just part of life. Some of it was betrayal masquerading as relationship. When you stop betraying yourself, you stop being so tired. The people who remain in your life after these shifts are different. Not necessarily different people, but different dynamics. There's more authenticity, more space, more ease. You're not performing, they're not extracting, you're just, with each other, meeting, seeing, being. You also notice, perhaps uncomfortably, that some people you thought you loved, you mostly needed. You needed them to need you. You needed the dynamic, the role, the identity of being the person they leaned on. When you release that need, what remains? Sometimes love, sometimes nothing. Both are valuable information. Your relationship with yourself transforms most dramatically. You realize how much energy you've spent trying to be who others need you to be, holding what others cannot hold, betraying your own truth to maintain peace or connection. And you realize, maybe for the first time, that you're allowed to stop. This doesn't make you selfish. It makes you sovereign, it makes you whole, and wholeness, ironically, makes you more capable of genuine connection, not less. Because when you're not depleted, when you're not resentful, when you're not betraying yourself, you can actually show up. You can be present, you can love without losing yourself. The transformation includes accepting that some people will never understand. They'll think you've changed, become cold, become selfish. They're right that you've changed, but you haven't become cold, you've become boundaried. You haven't become selfish. You've included yourself in the circle of people you're willing to care for. You also become more discerning. You can feel within minutes now whether a new relationship will drain you or energize you. You can sense the unconscious contracts people are offering before you sign them, and you can decline, kindly but firmly, to enter dynamics that require you to be less than whole. This is what Jung meant by individuation, becoming who you actually are rather than who you've been shaped to be by others' needs and projections. It's lonely sometimes. The path to wholeness is the loneliest journey because, by definition, you must take it alone. No one can do your shadow work for you. No one can reclaim your projections for you. No one can give you permission to be yourself. You must claim it. But on the other side of loneliness is solitude, and solitude is different. Solitude is being alone without loneliness, being with yourself as you would be with a beloved friend. And from solitude, from wholeness, from having stopped the drain, from there, you can enter relationship differently, not seeking completion, not outsourcing your shadow, not recruiting others to hold what you should hold. From there, you can love without losing yourself. You can connect without betraying yourself. You can give without depleting yourself. This is the promise of the work, not isolation, but genuine meeting, not coldness, but authentic warmth, not selfishness, but self-possession that makes real love possible. Remember that question from the beginning. About feeling hollow after being with certain people, now you understand it differently, that hollowness wasn't something taken from you. It was the cost of giving away what was never theirs to receive. Your wholeness, your authenticity, your energy that you used to hold up their psychological structures instead of building your own. The people who drain your energy without you knowing aren't villains. They're mirrors. They reflect back what you haven't yet integrated, what you're still willing to betray in yourself, what you're still outsourcing to others. They drain you only because you permit the drain, only because somewhere in your unconscious you've agreed to the exchange. But here's what's beautiful. Once you see this, once you truly understand the mechanism, you can choose differently, not through confrontation or drama, but through the quiet, persistent work of reclaiming yourself, through setting boundaries, through stopping the performance, through letting others carry their own shadow, through disappointing people who have grown comfortable with your self-betrayal. This is the work of a lifetime, returning to yourself again and again, noticing where you've wandered off into someone else's story, calling yourself back to center. Some days you'll succeed. Other days you'll find yourself depleted again, realizing you've unconsciously re-entered an old contract. That's okay. Individuation isn't perfection. It's a direction, a commitment to becoming more whole over time. The journey inward is the only journey that matters in the end. Everything else, relationships, work, purpose, meaning, flows from how well you know yourself, how willing you are to be yourself, how thoroughly you've stopped abandoning yourself for the comfort or approval of others. So when you next feel that familiar drain, that mysterious depletion after being with someone, pause. Don't judge it, don't explain it away, just notice. Ask, what am I carrying that isn't mine? What am I pretending? What am I betraying in myself to maintain this connection? And then, gently, with compassion for yourself and the other person, begin the work of stopping, of setting down what isn't yours, of calling your energy back to yourself, of becoming, finally, magnificently, uncomfortably, beautifully whole. This is your life, your energy, your one existence. Spend it on what's real, on what's yours, on the magnificent project of becoming who you actually are rather than who everyone needs you to be. The people who drain you are teachers. What they're teaching you is this: stop giving yourself away. You are not here to hold other people's shadows. You are not here to live as a supporting character in someone else's story. You are not here to betray your wholeness for the illusion of connection. You are here to individuate, to become whole, to meet others from that wholeness rather than from your wounds. This is the work. This is the way.